us. As you can hear just from this video, we are recording. I just want to go over a few.
It shows up and then it disappears.
Please mute on the bottom left-hand side on the bottom of your screen. Push the mute button, please. Also, on the view on the top right, when you see view, you can view the speaker speaking, which would be me, or gallery view, which would be all these squares that you see.
Which is
And then also, we're going to be using the chat feature on the bottom for Q&A at the end of the presentation. What I'd appreciate you guys do, and Colin might mention also, is save your Q&A until the end of the presentations. I think that'd be make for a better talk. We are recording, as I just said, and also the recordings are posted on YouTube. So our channel, which is ALK Positive Incorporated, check it out. All of the ALKtALKs are on there. We have an incredible December for us set up. I'm sharing the screen with you right now. We got Dr. Suresh Gagill speaking next Sunday, and then Igniting About ALKtALK, which is with MGH, with Justin Gaynor and Jessica Lynn. So, and then we also have all these other activities. This calendar is posted on the ALK Positive Facebook page. You can see it under the event section. And then also on your emails that you receive, you'll see a calendar also on the emails from the ALKtALKs. So further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen and pass it off to our former president, Gina Hollenbach, as she discusses our fundraising.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gina. I am going to share something with you because I'm so excited. Today it is December the 5th. And if you are not aware, we are doing a challenge. And our challenge is going to be to raise $5,000 by 5 o'clock tonight, wherever you are. So we're going to extend this a little bit past 5 o'clock because I know it's past 5 o'clock for some of you. But we're going to extend it till the end of ALKtALK to see how much we can actually raise. We checked this morning to see what we were doing by everybody giving up their favorite cup of coffee. Thank you for anybody who gave up your favorite cup of coffee for $5 to give to vital life-saving research and advocacy and ALK Positive's overall mission. So if you gave $5, thank you so much. We were about halfway there this morning. So we're going to see at the end of ALKtALK how far we have come. And so I wanted you, if you can, just pull out your phone, and we have a really great text to give option today. So if you text the word give to 1-404-383-9884, it'll take you exactly to the right site, and you guys can donate $5 if you haven't already, but we want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to do this. I'll put this number also in the chat, but again, we're trying to raise $5,000 by 5 o'clock tonight by giving $5. So if you can, text the word give to 1-404-383-9884, and we're going to see what we can do as an ALK community. So this money goes to incredible research, and I can't wait for Colin to tell you all about it.
Before Colin speaks, just really, please mute yourself on the bottom left hand where it says mute. And if you're on a cell phone, please mute yourself. And the speakers who will be speaking, you can unmute when you do your presentation. Thank you. Colin, it's yours.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm going to pull up a share screen here. So hopefully I can get this working right. Can everyone see this okay? Great. So I'm just going to be talking for about 5 minutes, just doing a bit of an overview. ALK Positive as a support group was started in about 2015. That was ground zero for us. Started with one person who got it all started. And I joined the group in 2017. I was diagnosed in 2016. When I joined in 2017, there were about 350 members, and we now have had close to 3,000 members join our group. So the growth of the group has been phenomenal. In 2017, we set up a outreach group. It was called the ALK Positive Outreach Group at the time. And that has now grown up and become a registered non-profit organization, which is called ALK Positive Inc. And so this year we became an organization that can directly accept donations rather than having to go through longevity or go to foundation or anything like that. The ALK Positive Medical Committee was also started in 2017 as part of that outreach group. And we started off initially just as having the research review panel, and that was set up to review grants that were being submitted and to pick out the ones that would be the very best. And the panel worked with experts, so it wasn't just our panel making the decisions. We have the Dr. Camages and Dr. Shaws and Dr. Gadgills and all of those great people of the world. And Emily Van Ans is going to be talking more about the research review panel in a little bit. Earlier this year, we set up a new group called the Research Acceleration Committee. And the Research Acceleration Committee was set up because there's tons of research that happens outside of academia. There's a ton of research that happens in industry. And what we are doing in the Research Acceleration Committee is bringing together academia, industry, and funding from venture capital and venture philanthropy funds and things like that. It's still a fairly new committee, but we've already made huge strides. We've got some really brilliant minds on the committee, and Carla Vass will be doing a presentation about that a little bit later on in the meeting also. We also this year set up the Clinical Trials Committee. The Clinical Trials Committee is aimed at working with companies that are either already doing a trial or are going to be setting up a trial, and working with them to make those trials be as productive as possible, productive for us as patients and productive for them as companies, because we need the companies to succeed with their trials in order for new treatments to be approved by the FDA. So we've had some really good success with the Clinical Trials Committee. And Jeff Stern is going to be presenting about the Clinical Trials Committee. Ellie Urban has done a phenomenal job setting up first the Clinical Trials Directory, and then just this year has set up something even better called Clinwiki. And it's a great guide for being able to access trials that are for ALK positive patients. Next in the presentation today is going to be Kimmery Kulig. She's actually speaking from the Dominican Republic today. And she is not part of the ALK Positive organization, but she is CEO and founder of PathPresenter.org, and ALK Positive and PathPresenter are collaborating on some really exciting new projects, and Kimmery is going to be talking about that, very excited about that. We've been working on a registry survey for a long time now, and we were about to release in May this year and had a last minute obstacle. So we've got to regroup. We're hoping that Mohaf Alashkar can present for that. And if he's unable to join us, then I'll do a brief presentation about that. And then also this year, we established the ALK Research Library. And the ALK Research Library is a phenomenal resource for both printed studies and also videos as well related to ALK research. We're building up the library. We currently have about 360 items of content in there. And when we get to the level of having 500, we're going to start marketing it to the academic and research world. The ALK Positive Medical Committee also runs some patient support programs. We will not be discussing those today, but just to give you a quick
I have internet
overview.
now.
I'm sorry?
Try again, Nelly. Resume.
Sorry, I had talking going on in the background. The patient support programs that we run is the Second Opinion program, Members Map, an oncologist directory, and then also the research library and Clinwiki are also patient support, but they also do help research acceleration as well. So I've got those under both categories. And we're going to have a separate ALKtALK at some point in the future regarding these patient support programs. So that's kind of the really quick overview. I'm just going to give a couple of quick examples before I pass on. I had emails this week from a doctor in Australia, 2 doctors in Australia actually, that lead research, and they are connecting with a doctor in Florida and working on creating a collaboration about changing the dosing of treatments using evolutionary models. And this is a really exciting field, but these doctors did not know each other. And we connected them and got them introduced. And we knew one of the doctors through the research review panel. They had put in an application both in 2018 and 2020. They never did receive an award, but they have kept in touch with us. And then the doctors in Australia, we know just through work that we've been doing with research as well. So you can see there kind of the synergy of these different committees. They're not all separate committees. They end up having a real synergy. Another example would be this week, Dr. Patil at the University of Colorado and Dr. Marusik in Florida are going to also be collaborating on evolutionary aspects as well. And the list goes on. So all these projects all intertwine and overlap. And when companies get a treatment that's going to get then ready to go into trials, it will move from the Research Acceleration Committee to the Clinical Trials Committee. So there's a real nice overlap and synergy between all these different committees. And I am now going to hand it over to Emily, and she's going to give you an overview about the research review panel.
Thanks. Thanks, Colin. I'm going to share my screen. So I just thought I'd first show a picture of the folks who are currently on the research review panel. You'll probably recognize some of them from the support group and from other ALK talks. And these are our panel members. So all of us have some kind of a medical background or a background reviewing grants. We have experience looking at research and evaluating research. So first we have Colin, who is, as you all know, the ALK Positive Medical Committee Chair, and he has a medical background in dentistry. He worked as a dentist for many years. The next is Jenny Blender. She's a patient and also a clinical psychologist with an undergraduate degree in microbiology and immunology and a PhD in psychology. And she's also spent multiple grant cycles reviewing lung cancer research grants for the Department of Defense Lung Cancer Research Program. So she had been doing that even before she joined the research review panel. Next, we have Ray Hall, who's a caregiver for his daughter, Summer. And Ray worked for over 40 years in the pharma industry, and he helped with clinical development and medical affairs and helped get clinical trials going and worked with doctors and pharma companies to make sure their clinical trials were running well. We also have Mark Muscovich, who's a newer member of the research review panel. He's a patient as well and currently working as a consultant for a company developing precision oncology medicines. And he has an education background in biochemistry and also has spent over 40 years doing academic and pharmaceutical research. He has run his own research lab and has also worked for companies doing drug development. So he has a deep and very strong background in science and drug development. Next, we have Julie Silberger, also a patient. She works as a management consultant and has degrees in Chinese studies and also in business. And she's spent 20 years in consulting and international business. And she is also, like Jenny, worked as a grant reviewer for the Department of Defense lung cancer research grants for a number of years. Next is Ellie Urban. Many of you know her from all her other work on the medical committee. She's a caregiver for her husband, and she's been a practicing hospital psychiatrist for over 30 years and also an assistant professor of psychiatry. And she has degrees in psychology and medicine. And finally, there's me, Emily Venanzi, and I'm also a patient. I used to do immunology lab research, and I have degrees in biochemistry and immunology, and have also done grant review for the Department of Defense. Now it's not letting me switch my slide. Oh, there we go. So the primary role of the research review panel is to plan and oversee the research grant process for ALK Positive. So the things we do are we choose organizations to partner with in the grant process. So we've worked with a couple of different lung cancer nonprofits so far. One is the Go-To Foundation for Lung Cancer, and the other one is the Longevity Foundation. And these larger organizations help us to find scientific reviewers. They have more experience managing the whole grants award process than we do at our newer, smaller organizations. So they've helped us along the way. We've gotten a lot of help, especially from Dr. Upal Basu Roy at Longevity, who really helps us run the whole process that I'll describe in a minute. We also decide what types of research we want to fund. So each time we're about to go through another round of grant funding, we look at, what are we already funding? What else needs to be done? Where are kind of the unmet needs in ALK Positive research? And from that, we craft a request for applications that reflects what we're looking for and what we want to fund next. And then probably our biggest job is actually participating in the grant application reviews. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that whole process in a minute. And then finally, after the review process is done, we are the ones who make a recommendation to the ALK Positive Board of Directors about which specific projects we think should be funded. And then the final decision is up to the board. So I'll talk a little bit more about how the research review process works. And this is how we've done it recently, for example, with the 2020 research grants with Longevity. So the first step is to write and issue this request for applications. So we talk to ALK experts, and we look at, like I said, at what kind of research we're already funding, what still needs to be done to help accelerate ALK research. And then we write up this request, which is then sent out to researchers and is posted in grants databases. So any researchers who might be interested in applying for our ALK research grants will be informed about what we're looking for. And once that request goes out, a couple months later, we will receive a bunch of letters of intent, they're called, or LOIs. And these are shorter kind of pre-applications talking about researchers' plans for what they would like to do with if they received one of the grants. So a group of us, this is the research review panel plus ALK scientific and medical experts, get together once we've received the LOIs and look at them all. Last time, for example, we received 14 of these and decide which ones seem the most interesting and most promising. And then those that we agree are the best are then asked to submit full applications. And last time, out of the 14 LOIs we received, we then asked for 7 full applications. So about half kind of went on to the next step in the process. And then once the full applications are received, that's when really the work begins. And, those are about 15 pages long. They contain all sorts of preliminary data and detailed plans for what the researchers are going to investigate. And in addition, they present the qualifications of the researchers and their backgrounds. And so each of us on the research review panel read and score these applications. And so do the expert reviewers that Longevity has helped us find. So these include people like Dr. Camage, Dr. Lovely, Dr. Gaynor. And Longevity is also very careful to make sure that there are no conflicts of interest. So for example, Dr. Gaynor, who works at Mass General, would not be reviewing a grant application from his own institution or from anyone that he's trained. So it's a very rigorous process of review. And so each of us individually reviews and scores the grants and the grant applications. And then after that's done, we all get together on a big, long Zoom meeting called a study section. And this is when we live discuss one by one the applications. And we hear the opinions of the scientific reviewers, and they hear of our perspective as patients. And at the end of all that, the research review panel meets and synthesizes all that information. And after that, we'll recommend which projects we want to fund. And there's even more back and forth than that. Sometimes, for example, in the last round, a couple of the projects we were really excited about, but they were a little more extensive or kind of outside of our budget for what we wanted to spend. And we were interested more in one aspect of a project rather than their whole project. And so we went back to the applicants and said, look, can you modify your proposal? Because we are really interested in funding this part of it. And they were able to be flexible with that. And we could really, really refine what we were wanting to fund. And I'm stuck here on I can't get to my next slide, but my next slide has a list of all the research that we funded. Sorry about, oh, here we go. Okay. So I'm not going to go through all this because there isn't enough time. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard these researchers talk at our ALK summits. So we funded almost $3 million of research so far. In 2018, our grants were focused on looking at the immune system in ALK lung cancer. In 2019, we funded a collaborative project with researchers looking at how to combat ALK drug resistance. And then last year in 2020, we funded a couple of clinical trials, an ALK vaccine and a clinical trial looking at combination therapies. And we also funded the development of a potential new treatment for ALK lung cancer, a new drug. So what's next? Right now, we're actually quite busy. The review panel is working on reviewing progress reports from the researchers. So all of our grant recipients then submit a report every 6 months about their progress. And we also get an updated budget. So we see if they're spending the money that we've awarded them on what they said they were going to spend it on. We evaluate whether they're making good progress. And if so, then we're able to issue kind of the next slice of their grant money. So we review the progress reports, and we also meet with the researchers over Zoom to get a little more color on how their work is going and what they might, what setbacks they've had, what new discoveries they've made. We're also working on an RFA for the next round of awards that we're going to do with Longevity in 2022. And we're also talking to the Lung Cancer Research Foundation about potentially collaborating with them as well on awarding a grant in the future. And that is my last slide here. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for your fundraising. None of this would be possible without the funds that you have all worked so hard to raise. And so, you're really making a difference and helping fund research that we hope will save our lives. Thank you. And next, I believe we have Carla, who will speak about the Research Acceleration Committee.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. Can you guys all see this? I think I'm sharing. Yep. Thumbs up, maybe.
Yep, you're good.
All right. Perfect. So hi, everyone. I'm Carla Voss, and I'm a caregiver for my husband, Ricardo Salgado, who has been an ALK positive patient since November of 2020. And I am also one of the 12 members of the Research Acceleration Committee. And I'm very excited to share more with you about the committee and what we've been up to. I know that most, probably all of us are blindsided when, we or a loved one is given this diagnosis. And, for me, it's been really wonderful just to connect with this amazing community and to really understand, where hope lies. And if there's one thing that I've learned from participating on the Research Acceleration Committee, or sometimes we refer to it as the RAC, it's that, we do have a lot to be hopeful for. Great. So we formed the RAC last spring, and our mission is to bring new, potentially curative therapies to the clinic ASAP, with a focus on later line, second line, and later therapies. One of the reasons the committee was formed is because as we would have discussions with, various doctors, researchers, even companies, it became clear that, there's a gap between early stage research and making sure that the most promising research actually makes it into the clinic. And so that's really what we want to focus on. It's who is doing the best research on ALK specifically, what are the best types of therapies, and then how do we accelerate that research and bring it into the clinic as quickly as possible, where it can actually help patients and hopefully save lives. I think there's a really nice synergy with obviously all the work that we do that Emily just spoke about. So, I obviously don't need to tell you guys this, but we have excellent, first line targeted therapies that work pretty well, things like alectinib, but as we know, eventually it is expected that most patients will develop resistance. And so we really wanted to look at, what's next and focus on second line or later therapies with the goal of identifying research that could eventually make ALK positive a chronic disease, or even lead to an outright cure. We have an excellent group of folks on the RAC who really bring a wealth of experience that is quite complementary. And, you've already heard from Emily, you'll be hearing from a couple of others tonight who serve across multiple committees. We have, I believe, 2 PhDs. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone on the committee. So Emily and Mark interpret a lot of the actual science for us, and their experience has been invaluable. We also have folks like JP, Ray, JT, who have extensive experience working in the pharmaceutical and healthcare industries. And then we have members from the business world as well, such as Ricardo, Jeff, Karthik, Pat, Julie, folks who have excellent experience in strategy, finance, investing in healthcare and biotechs, or even who've actually built companies. And then, of course, Colin, who leads the committee and just knows absolutely everything that's going on across ALK positive, and I suspect potentially the entire world. I'm not sure how he does it. So it really is an excellent group, and I'm excited to share a bit more about all that we've accomplished in the last 6 or so months that we've been in existence. So what do we actually do? First we need to understand where we will focus and spend our time. And that starts with identifying the most promising research being done in ALK positive today. So we really look at what are the therapies and modalities that doctors are excited about. And of course, what are the therapies that are a few years away from the clinic, but not 10 years away, because of course we all feel that sense of urgency. We're very fortunate that we're able to leverage the broader ALK positive organization, along with the networks of people that individual RAC members are all connected with. One of the things that we did early on was host a series of roundtable discussions with KOLs, where we invited them to come discuss and debate which therapies showed the most promise, and why. And then we got to hear firsthand what they were most excited about. And that then enabled us to really begin to prioritize where to look. Of course, ALK Positive also funds a lot of great research, through the grant program that Emily just shared. So we already had a foundation of understanding of, who were those top KOLs, what are they working on, and then, what can we do to actually help them move faster. Sometimes that means actually facilitating connections with other companies, or even, between KOLs who are working on similar problems. A good example of this is Dr. Chiarli at Boston Children's Hospital, who he and his lab are working on an ALK vaccine, which of course was funded partially by ALK Positive. And he has very good mouse models that he uses in his work. Dr. Lamb, who is at Johns Hopkins, is also working on a vaccine, approaching it from a different angle, but he did not have the specific type of mouse needed for testing. So the RAC was able to facilitate a discussion between them where they could really compare notes. And Dr. Chiarli and Dr. Lamb are now actually teaming up together on mouse studies, which will help them both move faster and advance the science. So that's just one example of, when putting two people together can really help make a difference and accelerate research. Another way we can help is through funding. So one of the roundtables that we hosted actually connected KOLs with venture capital companies who are looking for good projects, good early stage research projects to invest in and fund. So once we have a sense of the most promising modalities and therapies, and that includes everything from cancer vaccines to PROTACs to cellular therapies to small molecules, then we need to think about which companies are already doing good work in the space and go out and find those companies. So to give you one example, one of the promising areas that the KOLs had identified in a roundtable is something called TIL therapy. And it just so happens that Instill Bio is one of the leaders in the space. The RAC met with them, and they are currently getting ready to launch a trial that will include ALK patients. So there's more to come there. And this is one example of a situation where now the clinical trials committee will get more involved, and you'll hear more about that after this. So this is just, a small sample of some of the companies that we've met with, sometimes, multiple times over the past few months. And for us, the key is really, how can we advocate for ALK within these companies? While some might say that ALK positive lung cancer is a relatively, rare disease, it's really not. I mean, globally, we know that there are about 100,000 of us every year. The TKI market, which, primarily in the US is valued at around $2 billion annually. And that's growing 40% every year, which is, a huge opportunity for some of these companies. So we want to continue advocating with pharma and biotechs to ensure that ALK really stays on their radar, and to make sure they stay aware of the promising research in ALK and also the, continued need for new therapies. I just want to highlight one case study to just give you a better sense of some of the work that we're doing. So we knew from the research review panel and some of the KOL roundtables that Dr. Christine Lovely, who's at Vanderbilt University, was doing a lot of work in her lab on something called clusterin, which is something that ALK positive tumors seem to upregulate in order to help them become resistant to TKIs like alectinib. And her lab had already done a bunch of great work on this. They knew that clusterin was important to this process. And they also showed that if they could somehow knock down or inhibit clusterin, then they would potentially be able to delay or even halt resistance to TKIs. So the RAC identified a small early stage biotech called Alethia that actually already has a molecule developed that inhibits clusterin. And it turned out that Dr. Lovely had tried to get in touch with them back in January of this year, but had never heard back. And she actually shared the email with us. I included a small screenshot on the left there. So we were able to facilitate a discussion between Dr. Lovely and Dr. Filion, who's the Chief Scientific Officer of ALKtALK. And that discussion happened on June 6th, which then quickly led to, a more formal research partnership. Now, ALKtALK already had their drug in a clinical trial for a different indication, and that launched back in May. But now, thanks in large part to, Dr. Lovely's work and that collaboration, they're starting to design a trial which will specifically include ALK patients. So we're at a point where we're ready to turn this over to the clinical trials committee so that they can use their expertise to really help with the design of that trial. So just one example of, a way that we've been able to accelerate by making the connection between two parties and then helping push things along as conversations progressed. So what's next for the Research Acceleration Committee? We need more of everything. So we've identified the top modalities, but now, we're really, we're starting to go even deeper on the specific research projects and, figure out how can we push faster. We also need more money for ALK research. So one of the things that we're starting to look at are different initiatives, things like venture philanthropy and other ways that we can turn the 1 or 2 million that is invested in ALK research annually into 20 million, 40 million, 300 million. So there's a lot more to come here, and very excited. And of course, as Emily said, none of this is possible without this amazing group. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Jeff Sturm, who is going to share more about the Clinical Trials Committee.
Greetings, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Jeff Sturm. I'm a 7-year ALK survivor, currently on lorlatinib, and Friday I had my 29th PET scan. Awaiting results on Monday morning, so we'll see how that goes. I have a couple of business degrees and 1 psychology degree, and I've been with these committees. I'm on the Research Acceleration Committee since early this year. And Colin set up the Clinical Trials Committee earlier this year in order to create a potent communication channel between the patient group and the pharmaceutical companies themselves, to give us a voice of influence with the pharmaceutical companies as to how the clinical trials are designed, give us a seat at the table for that trial design, and in order to also inform and educate the patient group as to what clinical trials are available. Now, when does someone go into a clinical trial? Typically, it's when they've exhausted all the standard of care options. Now, what does standard of care mean for ALK patients? It means probably the end of TKIs. So come to the end of perhaps lorlatinib and perhaps the end of chemo. One's looking around for the latest kinds of treatments, and certainly the doctors and researchers are looking around for the patients to try out their experimental treatments. So having a pipeline to educate and inform on the one hand, and having the voice at the table with the pharmaceutical companies to influence and impact them and to help design those clinical trials and monitor them as time goes on is a very important function. And we've accomplished quite a bit of that in just the 6 or 7 months that we've been in business. The heart of the Clinical Trials Committee has to be Ellie Urban, who has been working with this clinical trial spreadsheet that you may have seen for several years, and now the Clinwiki interface and search engine for clinical trials. She remains the primary repository of all ALK trial info and wisdom, and as a worldwide resource, she is absolutely incomparable. When I first got to the committee earlier this year, despite my being ALK positive for so long, at Colin's invitation, I couldn't understand a word of what anybody was talking about. And most of you, many of you might have had that experience when you pick up a scientific article that gets posted on the website or try to look at one of the clinical trials in general, this information is really hard to understand. There's no question about it. So I started taking notes on one of those clinical trials, and then the notes became a written description of that trial that was in plain English. And then I thought, well, why don't I translate this to plain English for the patient group in the way that I used to in my professional career. And everybody loved it. So somehow I got going and got my competitive juices going, and wound up doing a whole series of these that are particularly focused on patients that have run out of standard of care treatments. And if you go to the primary website for ALK Positive and go to research and cutting edge trials, you'll find all of those write-ups. We're not done here, so they're a little hard to understand just yet. We're still, this is the first draft of it, but there'll be better labels and all. So there are 9 clinical trials here, all for patients that have run out of standard of care treatments. And you'll hear terms like ADCs, antibody drug conjugates, TILs, combination therapies, etc. So if you want an education on clinical trials, they're easy to read relatively, although Mark doesn't seem to think so. And all of the information is there. And if you need to go to a clinical trial, all of the connections are there with how to contact them, how to go to the websites for those clinical trials, etc. And I won't bore you with a million details there, but that first write-up that I did came from the Venanzi family, and Emily operates as a pair. Her husband Patrick is very much involved in biotech companies, and he posted a talk about Iovance. So I wrote up Iovance, and what I found was it took me 16 hours to write one page, because every time I picked up a new word and went looking for it, there were 3 levels of science behind that I had to go research. And it was very, very difficult, no 2 ways about it. But Emily's also on the clinical trials committee, and she is a Harvard immunologist, and we couldn't do it without her. She's also what we call a field worker in the clinical trials committee. And that she's in the MGH alectinib binimetinib MEK inhibitor trial. I'll say that 3 times fast. Another member of the clinical trials committee is Ray Hall, Summer's dad. Ray is the gentleman mentioned before that had a 40-year career with Novartis. Brings an enormous amount of experience in dealing with pharmaceutical companies to the clinical trials committee and other committees, all 3 of them. And now he bounced around, he and I bounced around on different clinical trials. We talked to Gilead about their antibody drug conjugate trial. Then we bounced somehow to Christine Lovely at Vanderbilt, who introduced us to a senior executive at Daiichi Sankyo. And and Ray wound up setting up a meeting with Daiichi Sankyo, and we talked at great length about their clinical trial, which is described on the spreadsheets, Wikipedia, and on the main page of the website. And you should know that next Sunday, there's the talk with Dr. Shirish Gadgil, the Henry Ford Cancer Center, about that Daiichi Sankyo antibody drug conjugate trial. Some of you will want to know a lot about that. I know Mark was interested in that. Anyone that's really on lorlatinib at this particular juncture is going to want to know about these clinical trials, because that one it has quite a promising future. And the it's been running for a few years, and there's a cohort in that Daiichi Sankyo antibody drug conjugate trial of lung cancer patients. They've announced the results for the melanoma patients and for the colon cancer patients in that trial. And the melanoma results were very promising. Not so for the colon cancer. So we are waiting for trial results, initial trial results from Daiichi Sankyo. And thanks to Ray for bringing us in there. Turning Point Pharmaceuticals, you probably heard that name and heard of TPX-0131, who has a trial going right now for 4th generation TKI that supposedly handles a lot of the dual mechanisms that arise out of lorlatinib treatments. We were successful at modifying their trial description. When it first came out, there were only 2 treatments, prior treatments allowed in the Turning Point trial. And what was really great for me to observe and participate in a little bit was the teamwork among the clinical trials committee, where we wrote up a very professional scientific paper that said, you need to change this to more than 2 prior treatments, because a lot of us have had 3 and 4 and 5 different treatments before we come to your trial, and you're our only hope in certain scenarios. And sure enough, they changed it. So the clinical trials committee it was kind of a proof of concept. Could we actually influence a clinical trial at the pharmaceutical level as a group? And certainly we have the qualifications to do it, the ability to do it, the will to do it. And darned if it didn't work the first time out of the box. And that was followed right after by our communication with a company called Nuvalent, which also has a 4th generation upcoming clinical trial. And there the concept was to get to the company before the clinical trial was announced and designed, so that we could contribute, if possible, in the trial design. And that was a concept and a dream that Colin had that, doesn't sound like something you could do as outsiders to actually influence a pharmaceutical company. But we had several meetings with them and talked to them at great length. And sure enough, they offered to send us the protocol document of their clinical trial that's coming up in 2022 for our review before it ever went to the FDA. And we did review it as a team. We made some comments and sent them back. I don't know what the feedback there was, but it was a very, very well-written clinical trial protocol report that we were very happy about. I'm gonna innovate on Carla's Alethea story, because I was there along with her, and that was one of the most amazing moments I've ever seen, where a patient group was actually creating a scientific collaboration out of amazing teamwork that was kind of like passing the ball around in basketball. It started out with Ellie's spreadsheet, where there was a very obscure clinical trial at MD Anderson published of this very obscure company that no one had ever heard of in Canada, founded by a gentleman that had been working on this clusterin treatment for 20 years. And he finally had established this clinical trial that was for lung cancer, but it was disqualified for ALK patients because it required prior immunotherapy, which we don't normally do because it typically doesn't work. Well, I wrote up the clinical trial and put it in the file. And then Julie Silberger, who another member of the Research Acceleration Committee that you've seen described before, pointed out that those two don't know each other, haven't talked, and that we need to do something. So then the ball went over to Carla, who set up this meeting between these two scientists. And Carla and I and Ricardo sat on this call, and Mario talked for about maybe 20 minutes about his scientific research about this clustering and ALK tumors or cancer tumors that produce clustering, which in turn causes metastasis by this alchemical process that I can't pronounce. And Christine Lovely on the call from Vanderbilt is going, wow, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And we're listening to the science being made here on the phone. Then she gets up on and goes through this whole research description of all of the science behind exactly what he was talking about for ALK patients. At which Carla's husband, Ricardo, says, so how are we going to work together, folks? What are we going to do next? And before you know it, they're getting ready to pass back non-disclosure agreements and material exchange agreements, whereby Mario is going to send Christine the drug so she can try it in her lab. And Christine is going to send Mario mice that have ALK positive non-small cell lung cancer so that he can try his drug up there on the mice. So you got this exchange, all happened in 50 minutes. I mean, it was just absolutely amazing. And we all came away from it just shaking our heads. Well, the end of that story is that we created a clinical trial there because the rumor has it that it's going into the clinic in January or February of next year, hopefully in the first quarter, maybe in the second quarter, we don't know. But the spark of teamwork created that spark of science that I think is the essence of what a clinical trial committee, not to mention Research Acceleration Committee, is really tasked to do. It's pretty miraculous for a bunch of amateurs to be able to really do that. So we've also talked to Moderna. We asked Moderna to why not create a vaccine for us from mRNA? They said, sure, so we'll talk about it. But they have bigger fish to fry, obviously, at this point. But you should know that they have a lung cancer clinical trial going that we're watching. There have been some results on that have come out from other kinds of cancers. We're waiting to see how that trial goes. The other member of the group of the research, the clinical trial committee is Mark Muskovitz. He's a new member. You've seen his qualifications before. And we wouldn't get too far without mentioning Gina Holenbeck, who is also on the clinical trials committee. No introduction needed there, but she's also currently doing field work for the clinical trials committee. She's on the Pfizer SHP2 lorlatinib trial, and our prayers for good results and minimal difficulties certainly go out to Gina. And I would be highly remiss if I didn't mention Linnea Olson, who is with us in spirit on the clinical trials committee. She passed away recently, was the ultimate clinical trial warrior. And we all owe her a debt of gratitude. Any of us that have TKIs circulating in our blood right now owe Linnea Olson a debt of gratitude for what she's been through, what she went through in her life. And we shall all miss her. But we owe a debt of gratitude to all of the people that have been involved in clinical trials, because, you know, by the time you get to a clinical trial, you're looking for a solution to save your own life, but you're also making a contribution to all the people that come after you. And without the warriors that have gone into clinical trials in the past, a lot of us wouldn't be here. including myself for absolute sure. And one of the things that participating in the clinical trials committee and on the research acceleration committee has done for me is there's a chemistry involved when you're talking to researchers where they come out of the labs perhaps, or they come out of their executive offices and they're meeting patients. And we become very, very real for them. And you can see, and they repeat it over and over again, just how motivating it is for them to meet the patients. And I think that's one of the contributions all of these committees is making in creating the cure, because I think that's a lot of what we're contributing to. And I think that cure is inevitable. Back to you, Colin.
Thanks, Jeff. Just a final thing on that before we pass on to Ellie. Just a couple of days ago, I had an email from a doctor in Australia who is doing a trial for ALK called ALKtALK, which many of you have heard about. And she has been connected at her request with Nuvalent, who is going to be starting the trials in the next few months as a 4th generation ALK TKI. And I got the two of them connected. And as a result of that, they're now having discussions about setting up a trial site at her institution in Australia, and also with Ben Solomon in Victoria as well. So again, it's just these connections that we make through different aspects that keeps moving things along. So I will pass on to Ellie.
Hello, I'm Ellie. It's great to see everybody. And thank you, Jeff, for your presentation. That was fantastic. Jeff was a big part of this initiative that I'm going to talk about now, so I want to thank him for working on that. The other thing I want to make sure that everybody knows is everyone talking here today, all of these committees that we're talking about are all volunteers, that these are people who are bringing their talents and skills to these groups and doing these amazing things. So we are not paid, we're all volunteers. Your money that goes to ALK Positive for your donations really goes straight to the research. And all of this work we're doing is a way to get it done. So what I'm talking about today is clinwiki.org. And we have a new website that's called ALK Positive Clinwiki. And this is a site that will help you search for a clinical trial based on either your location or where you're at in treatment, really be able to find a trial that's specific for you. One thing I wanted to say, Jeff, that you mentioned that sometimes clinical trials are chosen when people are more toward the end of treatment. And the reality is that you can start a clinical trial anytime at any juncture in treatment. So people who have never had any medication at all for ALK Positive can start in a clinical trial. Anytime you change medicine, you can look into clinical trials. And then, of course, if you're in a situation where you've run out of options, you can look into clinical trials. And it can really be an advantage because the clinical trials can have the most advanced treatment. And so we know from a lot of people, they've been able to really survive a long time by getting this treatment that's one step ahead of what's been approved already. So clinwiki.org with ALK Positive is working together to try to help us find clinical trials in our areas that would be best for us. So I'll go ahead and jump into it. So Clinwiki is a nonprofit organization, and they have a software program that helps search for clinical trials. ALK Positive is a nonprofit organization, and we have a giant spreadsheet that has a big list of clinical trials. So what we did was we got together and put the data from our spreadsheet into the Clinwiki software to develop a clinical trial search. And we'll see ALK Positive lung cancer. I'm going to take you through how to do the search so you can see how it works. So ALK Positive lung cancer. We'll click on that. Here is the home search page. And what you'll see is there are 78 trials for ALK positive lung cancer right now around the world that we have found. So here's our starting point. So I'm going to pretend like I am on lorlatinib and I live in Boston, which is actually a great place to live if you want to be in a clinical trial. So I'm on lorlatinib, I'm in Boston, and I've had progression.
Ellie,
So, yes.
we're still just seeing the first image of clinwiki.org.
Okay, thank you. Let me see. There we go. Do you have it now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm a Zoom newbie, so I appreciate your help there. So to start over, this is the home page for the search. And then there are 78 trials for ALK positive lung cancer that are listed. So I'm on lorlatinib, I live in Boston, I've had progression. I want to look at clinical trials to see if there's a good one for me. Well, 78 trials is way too many to sort through. So I need to figure out how I'm going to filter this to find the trial that's going to be right for me. So one thing I can do is look at location. And we've got 3 different ways to look for location. I'm going to start with countries. It lists the countries in order of who has the most clinical trials. So United States is first. Interestingly, China is second. And it goes through all the countries that have clinical trials for ALK positive lung cancer. So you can look for your country. Another option is to look under states, and it lists the states alphabetically, but again, it shows how many trials are in each state. So you can get a feel for that. In this case, we can look under zip code. So for Boston, I'll put in the zip code 02134, and then how far you're willing to travel from the zip code. So let's say 25 miles. We'll click on enter. And now our 78 trials have been narrowed to 20 trials. So we've got it way down. So within 25 miles of Boston, there's 20 trials that are recruiting for ALK positive lung cancer. So that's good, but it's still too many trials for me to try to sort through. So I need some more filters here. The next thing we can look at is prior ALK TKI status. So this is looking at where are you in treatment. One option, no prior treatment with ALK TKIs. Well, that's not me. I've been on many. Prior treatment with ALK TKIs other than lorlatinib. Well, that's not really me because I've been on lorlatinib. Prior treatment with lorlatinib or all available ALK inhibitors TKIs. Okay, that's me. I'm going to click on that one. And that's going to take us down to 16 trials. Still too many trials for me to sort through. So I've got one more filter I can use. Recruiting for general lung cancer, but may include ALK, or recruiting specifically for ALK lung cancer. Well, I'd like to try the ones recruiting specifically for ALK to see what's out there. So I'm going to click on that. And now we've got it down to 7 trials. Okay, that's a reasonable number for me to take a look at. So let's see what we got. Click on view results. And here are the 7 trials that come up. So if I look at these, the first 2 involve alectinib. I think, well, I've been on alectinib. I have progression. I don't want that. But the third is lorlatinib combinations in lung cancer. So that sounds pretty interesting to me. Maybe they can give me a drug with lorlatinib that'll help it work longer. So let me take a look at that one. I'm going to click on show more. Did it go to the next page? Or do I have to stop?
No, you're good.
It did. Okay. So clicking on show more, lorlatinib combinations in lung cancer. Here's some information from clinicaltrials.gov, which is the main database where this information comes from. And you can click here and it will actually bring you to the clinicaltrials.gov page. And we don't have time to do that right now, but it has a lot more detail. And then we can go down and look at locations as to where it's recruiting. It's actually only Boston. That's the only place. We don't have a world map yet, but we're working on it. This is the most important part here. Information from the ALK Positive Medical Committee. Here, we have included a lay summary, which gives you kind of in plain English what this trial is all about. And then here, key inclusion criteria. This summarizes the inclusion criteria. So you can see at a glance, will I fit in this trial or not? Is this for me or not? And for this particular lorlatinib combination trial, advanced or metastatic ALK, yep. Progression on at least one ALK TKI, including lorlatinib, yep. Previous chemotherapy, okay. Includes pretreatment and serial tissue biopsies unless poses risk, okay. And then brain mets must be stable. Leptomeningeal disease is included in the trial. Okay, well, I actually meet all of those criteria. So this is a trial that I can talk to my doctor about, or even go straight to the researcher and ask them about. The next part that we have here is a comprehensive summary, and this is what Jeff Sturm wrote. So we've included these summaries when you look up a trial, so you can get a sense of the real world language for what's happening here with this trial. So that's how you search for a trial on Clinwiki. And Boston has the most trials, so that there was a lot there. Sometimes location alone can narrow it to 3 trials, and you can just take a look at it there. So I unfortunately have to leave soon. So I was going to take questions right now if people want to just go ahead and unmute and ask. If there's any, that's okay too. All right. And I do encourage you to use this. The website, let's see. Can you see this? Oh, well. The website is clinwiki.org. If you just put in your browser, clinwiki.org, it will come up, and then you can go ahead and search. So thank you very much, and thanks everyone for working on this. The staff at Clinwiki were very helpful. The clinical trials committee is extremely helpful. And then everyone who's helped with that spreadsheet over the years, who's given us trials to put in it. And we even have people now who are searching every month for trials, and it's just very much appreciated. It's a great patient resource. Our next speaker is Kimmery Kulig, and she works for PathPresenter. PathPresenter is an organization, as I understand it, that uses artificial intelligence to develop treatment and diagnostic algorithms. And their hope is in working with us to be able to use our data as patients to improve our diagnosis and treatment strategies. So Kimmery, I'll sign it over to you.
Thank you, Ellie. First, I just want to say I'm really honored to be joining your meeting tonight, and I'm just so impressed. This is the first time I've dialed in to an ALKtALK, and you're just so organized and so smart, and so I'm just really, really impressed. So I'm really humbled to be a part of your evening tonight. So, as Ellie said, my name is Kimmery Kulig, and my brief background is that my training is in immunology, molecular oncology, and epidemiology. And I've worked in the pharmaceutical world. I've worked at both Pfizer and Bristol Myers Squibb, as well as I did a brief time at the National Comprehensive Cancer Center, where I managed their outcomes database. And I also worked at a Google health tech company called Verily. And as Ellie mentioned, I'm now with a company called PathPresenter. I just want to reflect for 1 second on my time at Pfizer, though, because I kind of feel like I'm coming home a little bit, because I did work on the crizotinib program. And my role on that program was really to try and find out more about the natural history of ALK translocated lung cancer, because at the time when Pfizer was developing crizotinib, there was really nothing known about the real world prevalence, or it's really about the prognosis. And there were actually some erroneous publications stating that the prevalence was 13% and that ALK translocated lung tumor patients actually did better. And it turns out that wasn't true. And I was sort of hell bent on kind of proving that by doing some large cohort studies and sort of comparing apples to apples. And so in the work that I led, we found that patients were on average about a decade younger, were largely never smokers. And what really interested me was that ALK positive tumors actually were correlated with a distinct kind of a rare pathological feature called signet ring cell morphology. And that is kind of what first got me interested in how gene alterations, like a gene mutation or alteration, could actually manifest itself as a physically identifiable feature when you look at tumor tissue under a microscope. And so those were sort of my first beginnings of being kind of interested in what pathologists see when they look down a microscope, and could a computer maybe help or even do it better in some cases. So fast forward, I'm now working for a company called PathPresenter, and we create digital pathology and digital radiology clinical practice tools as a platform. But our real goal is to enhance clinical practice with best-in-class artificial intelligence-based computer algorithms that will assist humans in, as I like to say, assist humans in outperforming themselves in interpreting things like tumor growth patterns or predicting prognosis or response to very specific therapies, or even predicting biomarker status from an image. All of these things are actually possible. However, the biggest bottleneck has been access to digital images, plus some known clinical information about these images. So for example, a CT scan or a lung radiology scan, that's one piece of data. And then also knowing that it's ALK translocated, those two pieces of data together can enable a whole new branch of research that I'd actually love to come back with some friends of mine to talk about in much more detail with you, hopefully on another talk. But in the meantime, the message I want to send is that access to these digitized medical images is really hard for researchers to access, because it's terribly expensive to acquire them from medical practice. It requires a lot of heavy legal negotiation and red tape over many, many months, and these legal fees add to the research bill. And then there's additional investigator fees and administrative overhead, indirect institutional fees, and really that really all adds to the research bill. And then there are the operational and logistic challenges and issues such as, having to de-identify images before they are scanned and digitally uploaded, and that adds more time and personnel cost to research. And so at the end of the day, a very modest size study that uses digital images can cost $1 million or more. And so I think my theory is that, things could move faster in this area of research if some of these bottlenecks and costs, were better managed. And so we had this idea with PathPresenter that if we could partner directly with patients and ask them to donate their medical images to research and sort of cut out this sort of legal, administrative, logistic quagmire that honestly really does slow down and make these studies prohibitively expensive. The idea would be then to create a medical image data bank for AI research and tool development that will be jointly directed by ALK Positive and PathPresenter. And I personally think that patients hold the key and have the power to seed a burst of clinical innovation in this area. And I was very impressed when you were talking about how you influenced pharma companies to design their trials. I think that's exactly the type of thing that you absolutely can influence. And I similarly feel that the whole field of machine learning and artificial intelligence medical images is another area where patients can really sort of lead the charge in enabling more rapid development and progress in this space. And so I'm happy to say that we now have an IRB reviewed and approved pilot study protocol that will aim to collect 2 or more radiology images from up to 200 ALK positive patients who consent to the study. And we've named the study the ALK Power Study, which stands for ALK Patients' Own Way to Empower Research. And a little bit more, I don't want to get into too much of the operational detail. I know our time is limited, but I just want to mention that, PathPresenter is signed up to do the heavy lifting on this study. And we want to make it really, really easy for patients to participate. PathPresenter will also cover the costs of the study. And I've told my colleagues that if I have to call 200 separate institutions and direct them how to upload images into a secure cloud folder, I will do so, because this proof of concept is so important and could be exemplary of how research can be conducted much faster, less expensively, and with more, really important and near and dear to me is with more disclosure to and more involvement. And so it's really kind of a passion project of mine, and I'm really thrilled that ALK Positive is on board as a trailblazing partner in this. And I'd love to come back and give more detail on the research itself and this field of research at a later date, if I may. So with that, I guess I turn it over to Morhoff, who will talk about the survey and registry committee.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Morhoff Al-Ashkar. I am a stage 4 lung cancer patient survivor. I'm ALK positive, diagnosed 2016. So with November of this year marked 5 years surviving cancer. I'm a family physician by training, associate professor here at the University of Washington. I also hold a PhD in education, specifically in research methodology. I've been a part of the community for quite some time. Some of you probably know me through the project that I led, where I interviewed patients with ALK positive EGFR ROS1 and explored their experiences with cancer diagnosis, how they're finding meaning, how they're finding resiliency. And that work had been very, very rich and very empowering to myself, and I hope that helped bring some of the stories up to more conversations. I'm excited here to share with you about work that I've been a part of, and I'm a member of a group that have been leading this, Colin, Emily, Ellie, Jenny, and others, developing a longitudinal survey that's patient-led to explore the experiences of patients with ALK positive from the diagnosis through treatment and survivorship and beyond. This is, you probably heard enough today to come to believe that patient-led research, patient-led work is not only empowering to us, but also is meaningful, because we ask the questions that are meaningful to us, that are relevant to us, and we guide and direct and we lead those conversations. So doing a work that's that focuses on our experiences is particularly relevant, because you can explore elements of it. Survey research is powerful if it's done well. It can lead to a lot of insight about people's experiences that you would not get necessarily from abstracting charts, or you would not get from interviewing people, because it allows you with a click of an invite for someone for 100, for 1,000, for more, to get rich information that are organized, that are methodically, if the questions are developed well, methodically collected, you can answer questions that are relevant for you. So this builds on a work Colin have started actually a few years ago, where he gathered information about the group's demographics, the group's experiences with diagnosis, treatment, what drugs they're on, and some other questions that helped him get a feel of the group that formed that are diagnosed with ALK. And that was, I believe, a few years ago, and got a few hundred people. Then we got together, and the group had gone through a lot of phases of development and multiple iterations. In its final iteration, the group, we got an IRB approval from the University of Washington to develop this longitudinal survey, so in which we will ask patients every 6 to 12 months to tell us about their experiences, starting with the diagnosis, of course, and then as they're living, continuing to live, hopefully well with the condition, what are their experiences with treatment, if they have to jump medications, what are the options that they were given. And then you can go back and answer questions that are relevant. As I said, diagnosis, treatment, survivorships, questions about quality of life. In this work, when we complete it, we'll be able to tell others about this group that constitute the ALK positive, who is getting diagnosed with ALK positive. And this is particularly relevant for me. In the past year or so, I've shifted actually focus to look into disparities in care. We know that in our experiences with cancer diagnosis, and still unfortunately in the United States, if you're living closer to a cancer center, if you are of a particular race, if you are of particular socioeconomics, you're more likely to receive the state of the art of the treatment. If you're not, if you're a person of color, if your income is not of the higher brackets, if your health literacy is not on the higher end, then your experiences might not be actually similar or comparable to those who have those privileges. This is problematic. This is troubling as well. So when we're looking at the survey, first you'll be able to characterize the people that are receiving this, receiving the diagnosis, are getting ALK positive. And then also throughout, you look at factors, demographic factors that are correlating or linked to particular outcomes more or less. You'll describe the group, that's first. And then you're looking also among the questions that we're curious about, the experiences of diagnosis. We all hope that there will come time when people, when the disease is just starting in their bodies, when the first cancerous cell is starting, you'll detect it and you'll hopefully nip it on the bud, and then you'll just be done. Often with lung cancer, more people, actually over 50% of people, are diagnosed in stage 4. So then the question becomes, what are factors that are leading to some of the delays of the diagnosis? Why are people showing later than others? And that's a very important question. May not affect those who are living with it, but as many of us on this platform do this work really for the next person who will be diagnosed with cancer, and hopefully to prevent it for other people that will come after us. The experiences of treatment and survivorship are very, very important. The medications that are offered to some people, unfortunately, when they get diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer, they quickly get offered chemotherapy and start on chemotherapy, and molecular testing would not be even mentioned to them. Again, that's more in people of color, more in people who have no access to resources, or people like Colin, who would give them really the abstracted and distilled essence of what's known in this space. And this is unfortunate. We want to see what people are offered of treatment and how are they faring when they're offered this option versus that option. As they're continuing to live with this illness, and among those who progress, what are factors that are correlating with the progression of their illnesses? What are some protective factors? I know the community are very curious, and when I interviewed people with lung cancer, talking about diet, what are you eating? What are you not eating? What are you avoiding? Exercise, this complementary alternative approaches, all those are relevant, and learning and trying to understand whether actually making this choice or the other would impact the person's outcome is very important, and a question that we're interested in. And many other. This is a longitudinal survey. We expect that will last 3 to 5 years, collect very rich information, and potentially become a platform to recruit people to participate with other research that is ongoing. Let's say, for example, a researcher says, I am looking for those individuals who have been on alectinib and now they're starting on lorlatinib within this time frame. Can you help me recruit this or that or this many number of people? We'll say, sure, we will help you with that. We can send email to those participants and say, hey, so-and-so is doing this research. If you're interested, reach out to them. And many of us here in this community, in this lung cancer community, are generous to want to participate, to produce knowledge, again, as I said, to help others in the future. The project has been ongoing for quite some time, and we hit a few bumps on the road, but we're determined to keep moving forward. We had, for example, we had a platform, a private company that we wanted to get their help with launching the survey and getting and housing the information from participants. And we were at the moment of launching immediately when things fell apart, and we had to find alternative. The University of Washington has a space to do that, and we're hoping that we'll receive the support so we can continue to do this work and get this project. This is a lot of efforts has been developed in this, and it has a lot of potential to bring information from people, from us, to then abstract and learn and produce knowledge that's going to be useful for our community. So just wanted to share this with you, give you the update, and hoping that you would hear in the next few months invitation to participate. Want to share last thing, that this work, the quality of the product that would come out of this work will depend on the input. And that means two things. The more people participate, the larger the N, the larger the number, the larger than the more capacity we have to do statistic testings. For example, those among you who are familiar with statistics, if you have larger number, you can ask many questions, even the detailed and the minute ones, and you can look at different, you can slice the data in this way or that way. So the more people participate, and I say by saying the more, I hope that every single person of us would participate in completing this study. The second very important determinant is the quality of the data. I would not hide, I would not lie to you. This is an extensive survey that might take more than 1 hour, might take 2 hours or even 3 hours. And I want to say thank you in advance for everyone who will participate and who will complete it till the end with thoughtfulness and with as much detail as possible. We wanted to make this to be rich and to be as detailed as possible because we come with an open attitude that we do not really know. There is some fishing expedition, and I don't lie to you, because we are curious to pick on every little signal that would tell if you do this or that or the other, then you might actually be faring better. When we pick on the signal, we're not, this is the study, and keep in mind, survey studies are not the final, and we're not going to generate knowledge to tell you, you should do this or you should not do that. We're picking on signals. So then when we when the research committee seeks grant or invite researcher to say, hey, we found a signal that maybe doing this or that or the other could contribute to a better outcome. Can you investigate that? Can you develop more methodical way, including clinical trials, to investigate with it whether this signal is actually relevant or not? I am saying this to say that the completion of the data with as much detail, as much thoughtfulness is really important. The larger the number of people who participate, the more detailed the completion is, the more successful this project. And I hope that you'll hear soon about it, and then we'll get everyone participating. Thank you again for giving me the space to share about this work, and really the work of love that everyone else actually probably put way more than I did, especially Colin, especially Ellie, Emily and Jenny put way more work than I did in this work. So I'm grateful to be part of this space as well. So I want to give it back to Colin.
Thank you for a great presentation there, Morhaf. And I will let you know there's enormous interest in a survey from industry. They are very interested in helping fund ALK Positive to fund this survey. And as Morhaf said, the more people and hopefully everybody that can participate in that, the more useful data, which will help our futures. So when that survey does come out, as Morhaf said, it will be a time commitment, but I really encourage you to make that time commitment because research is everything for our future, and research depends on data, and we're the source of the ultimate repository for all that data. Last committee that I want to talk about, and I'll keep this very, very brief. I'm going to do a screen share here. If I can find it. So the ALK Research Library Committee was just set up earlier this year. I chair it. Jan Nina, who lives in the UK, is the manager for the project. She's done a fantastic job. Kirk Smith is in charge of the website, and he's done a huge amount of work. And then all these other members here, Alice, YH, Deanne, Emily, so many people have done an incredible job of developing this site. So I'm going to go down to the next screen. If you can, the website for the library is www.alkpositive.org/ALK-research. And the easy way to get to it is to go to our website. And if you click on research, and then where it says ALK Research, and this will be changed soon to read Research Library, but at the moment it's under ALK Research. And you will find this page that now contains over 350 items of content, both videos and studies. The content is sorted by case study, clinical trials, editorial, preclinical, preprint, real-world outcomes, review paper, and video. And each item has a tag that tells you which one it is. And you'll see the heading, you'll see a short description, you'll see the journal and DOI number, and you'll see all the authors and the publication date. And to read the article, you just click on read article or click on there, and that'll take you to the article. You can also go by using the filter tags, or you can go and just type in a search here. So if you wanted to look for papers by Dr. Lovely, you could just type in LOVLY there, or CAMH and type in CAMH, or if you're interested in TKIs, you could just go there and click in TKIs or brigatinib or whatever you want. Now, at the moment, you might think of this as just being a patient support service, but in the longer term, it's going to bring in researchers and oncologists and doctors. And the more we bring in all those experts to be aware of our group, the greater our standing, and the greater our standing, the more we can achieve. So I'm just going to stop the share here. And I'm just going to give you a little story. Just in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I was invited to be on the advisory board for a really huge ALK Positive research project. I can't disclose where it's being held, but I can tell you it's in the multi-millions, and it's the biggest thing I have ever heard about for ALK research. And they reached out to me because of the fact that our organization is becoming well known. And so all of these things all compound, they all work together. The outreach we have with doctors, the outreach we have with researchers, the recognition we get. I'm not even quite sure how Kemery found me to reach out to me, but that's again just an example of how this organization is really just becoming more and more recognized. We're still new, as I said. We only started as a outreach group in 2017. So everything you've seen here has all been achieved in the last 4 years, and it is exponentially growing. So I just want to thank all the speakers that spoke tonight. You've all been absolutely fantastic. And we're going to open it up to question and answers. So if anyone wants to open up their mic and just ask a question, that's probably the easiest way to do it. And just ask, when you want to ask a question, if you could specify who you want to address the question to.
Yeah, Colin, I have questions here. you said share with us some of the surveys through the Facebook. Is that the survey was requested by the Mohave, or is it a different survey? It's just a couple of days ago, I think.
I'm not familiar with what you're talking about.
We received one of the survey requests for the Facebook recently, I think a couple of days ago, and was very extensive survey through the Facebook. And I probably spent almost like 40 minutes to complete that. I saw this pretty interesting survey. I'm just curious, is that survey?
That's not the survey Morehouse talking about. And honestly, I don't know what survey you are talking about. Sorry.
It's the REACH survey that you asked us all to complete, Colin.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, no, that's nothing to do with this survey. That's something very different.
Okay, thank you, Colin.
Are there any other questions from anyone?
Colin, it's JT. I just wanted to add a little comment and plug for all the work that's on the Research Acceleration Committee. Looking at everyone that's on the call, don't underestimate the power of your network. Colin spoke about Instill Bio and the conversations that have started there. I'll just share that I was connected to a board of director at Instill Bio on my LinkedIn profile and sent that individual a simple note saying, let's talk for a few minutes. That ultimately led us to the chief medical officer of Instill Bio and turned it over to Colin and team. So look at your network, look at who you know, reach out, because the simplest interaction may actually lead to great things for our organization. So thanks to all who presented tonight, and thanks for all of you for helping.
Yeah, that's so absolutely true. And if there's, well, I guess I'll do a little plug. Everyone that's on all the committees, as Ellie mentioned, they're all volunteers. I've pretty much headhunted everyone, if you want to use that term. And sorry, if you could turn off everyone mute, please.
No, I'm good.
So if there's anyone that does have a very strong background in either medical research or business, if you feel like you can help in any way, please just email me at medical@alkpositive.org. And we do try to find a place for everyone. Sometimes there just isn't a place because everyone that joins our committees needs management, and there's a limit to how much I can do. I do want to say we have been in the process of wanting to hire a chief scientific officer. And we did have someone that was ready to start just 3 days ago. And unfortunately, their family had a health crisis at the last minute and they had to pull out. And the person that would have been the next in line, unfortunately, just 2 weeks ago had found another position. So we're kind of back to square one a little bit. But we will get there, and we're going to have a CSO that will be able to vastly accelerate everything that we're achieving. At the moment, I'm just a volunteer, I'm a patient, and I feel like I'm working full time, but I don't know how much longer I'm going to be well for, and I want to kind of do things in my own life. If you know of anyone that would have a very, very, very strong background in oncology research, that's a likable, nice person, please feel free to get them connected with me, and we will be getting someone hired in the next 2 or 3 months, we certainly hope. So with that, I am going to pass it back to Mark and Gina, and I know we've gone pretty long meeting tonight, but I think you'll agree there was a ton of incredible information presented. And everyone have a great week. Thanks.
Before I pass it off to Gina, I just want to say, volunteer-wise, I mean, you don't have to have medical information or anything to be a volunteer to make a difference. Nancy Persanti, I believe, you can contact her, private message her, and just say, hey, I want to volunteer, and they'll find a place for you. Or you can also PM me if you want to get more involved in her activities that we do weekly. And then I'll pass it off to you. Gina, who's headed up lung cancer, the awareness campaign. So Gina, it's all yours. And
Yes.
thank you.
Thanks so much to all the presenters. This was so awesome. And it's just so great to put out all the work that, you know, has been being done and allow everybody to know what's going on. So super exciting. I do want to just, as a clinical trial participant, somebody who has run out of targeted therapies, I want you to know that clinical trials are tomorrow's treatments today. And so it's something to really think about. Instead of thinking of yourself as a lab rat, you're more of a pampered poodle. So, you know, really to consider clinical trials and looking at those, the more participation we have in those, the more that we can advance medicine for ALK positive patients. So really give a look to Clinwiki, and thank you so much to the medical committee for all that you do. It's amazing work. And I want to share with you, because I am super, super excited. First of all, I want to tell everybody who gave up your favorite coffee drink, thanks a latte, because we did some amazing fundraising. In the last hour, we raised $46,000. Okay, so the total amount that we have raised is $8,323. So our goal was to raise $5,000 in one day, but instead we raised $8,323. That is absolutely amazing. You guys can give yourselves a huge round of applause. I'm so excited about all of the money that we raised really just in this last hour and a half or so. You guys did an incredible job. If you want to give, you can always go to ALKpositive.org. We're getting so close to reaching our $1 million goal. So thank you guys so much for working together and funding some life-saving research. It truly matters. Driving research truly matters. So if you want, everyone can take your mic off of mute to thank the medical committee, and then we'll end the meeting from there.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Well done.
Amazing work.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.